The unseen path. The world of tech, innovation, and leadership is often perceived as a realm of relentless ambition, sharp minds, and towering skyscrapers that stretch toward the heavens. But behind these sleek facades lies a story of perseverance, quiet struggles, and unspoken challenges that even the brightest minds have to face. Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google and Alphabet, was no stranger to the journey from humble beginnings to global recognition. However, life had one more test in store for him, a test that would transcend anything he had faced before. It all started in the spring of 2025, on a seemingly ordinary evening at Sundar's luxurious villa in California. The villa, perched on the edge of a cliff, offered sweeping views of the Pacific Ocean, with golden sunsets casting an ethereal glow on everything it touched. To the world, Sundar's life appeared flawless, a picture of success, with a powerful position at the helm of one of the world's most influential companies. But behind the walls of his villa, something unusual was brewing, an event that would set Sundar on a path of self-discovery and personal growth. Late one evening, while walking through the mansion's underground garage, Sundar's foot struck something hard beneath the marble floor. It wasn't just a bump. It was as if something had shifted, a secret force had stirred. Curiosity piqued. Sundar immediately called his security team, who began to investigate the strange occurrence. After a few hours of intense searching, a team of engineers and specialists arrived. Their objective was to assess the integrity of the property, but as they began digging deeper, their expressions shifted from casual confidence to stunned disbelief. There, buried beneath the foundation of Sundar's villa, lay an ancient tunnel, a secret passage that appeared to have been built centuries ago. What was most shocking was not the tunnel itself, but what lay at the far end of it. Deep in the tunnel's bowels, an enigmatic chamber awaited. It was filled with artifacts, old manuscripts, and objects of such significance that they couldn't have been mere trinkets. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, while the floor was littered with dusty books, some of them written in languages long lost to time. The police were soon called in, and a team of forensic experts conducted an initial investigation. However, no one had any clear answers. What was the purpose of this hidden space? Why had it been sealed away for so long? And why had it surfaced in Sundar's property, out of all places? These questions echoed in the minds of the authorities, but the truth was still elusive. As the police conducted their search, Sundar remained in his study, contemplating the events unfolding below. His mind, often occupied by the complexities of running a global enterprise, was now consumed with thoughts about fate, history, and the strange twists of destiny. How had he ended up in this situation? What role was he meant to play in this mystery? He had always believed in the power of innovation, the possibility of creating something meaningful for the world, but this discovery was different. It wasn't about technology or progress. It was about something much deeper. Later that night, Sundar decided to take matters into his own hands. He visited the site of the tunnel with a team of archaeologists, eager to uncover more about its origin. As they ventured further into the darkness, the air grew thick with mystery. The walls, though weathered by time, seemed to whisper of forgotten stories, untold truths, and lessons long buried. One artifact caught Sundar's eye, a simple leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. It seemed like it had been waiting for him. As he opened it, the words inside felt strangely familiar. They spoke of leadership, of resilience, and of the importance of staying true to one's values, even in the face of adversity. The book seemed to contain the life lessons of an unknown figure, someone whose journey mirrored Sundar's own in many ways. The more Sundar read, the more he realized that this wasn't just a random discovery. It was a message from the past, urging him to reflect on his life and his legacy. He had spent years building Google, advancing technology, and leading one of the most powerful companies in the world. But this book, hidden beneath the walls of his home, called him to something more. It was a call to look beyond the metrics of success and to focus on the human elements that truly mattered. kindness, empathy, and perseverance. As he continued reading, the words began to resonate deeply within him. The figure in the book had endured hardships, faced personal losses, and struggled with doubt, but through it all, they had maintained an unwavering belief in the power of human connection. This was a lesson Sundar had often struggled with himself, how to balance the drive for success with the need for genuine human interaction, the pursuit of profit with the cultivation of kindness. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted his thoughts. One of the archaeologists had discovered something, a hidden compartment in the back of the chamber. Inside, there was a set of strange symbols, and beneath them, an inscription that read, "The true measure of success is not what you build, but what you inspire in others." Sundar stood frozen, the weight of the words sinking in. This was more than just a cryptic message. It was a revelation. It was as though the universe had delivered this lesson to him at the perfect time. He had been so focused on achieving external success, but now he realized that his true impact would be measured by the way he influenced the lives of those around him. This was the beginning of a new chapter in Sundar's life, a chapter that would challenge him to go beyond the boardrooms and headlines and into the hearts of people, a journey that would redefine what it meant to lead, not just in business, but in life. And so, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, Sundar made a decision. He would no longer be driven by the expectations of the world or by the demands of technology alone. He would become the leader that inspired change, a beacon of hope for others, a person who valued kindness above all else. But little did he know, this discovery was just the beginning of a much larger journey, one that would take him across the world and beyond, challenging everything he thought he knew about success, resilience, and the human spirit. The legacy of the hidden path. Sundar Pichai stood alone in the quiet, dimly lit chamber, the words of the ancient book still echoing in his mind. The walls around him, etched with centuries-old symbols, seemed to pulse with energy. His thoughts were clouded, but there was clarity within the chaos. He had been given a message, a rare gift from the past, one that transcended his professional accomplishments and the immediate goals of his career. For years, Sundar had been at the helm of Google, an iconic company that shaped the future of technology and connectivity. He had been a visionary in the tech world, pushing boundaries and overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Yet, in the quiet of this secret chamber beneath his villa, he realized that he had been chasing the wrong kind of success. For the first time in his life, he felt the overwhelming weight of his true calling. It wasn't about building another groundbreaking product or being the architect of the next technological revolution. It was about how he could leave a lasting impact on people, the kind of impact that went beyond the digital landscape and reached the core of human emotion and spirit. The hidden tunnel beneath his home, with its cryptic inscriptions and age-old teachings, had opened a door to a completely new dimension of understanding. This was not the path of external recognition that he had been following, but the internal journey toward empathy, kindness, and the profound ability to inspire others. He could no longer ignore the realization that his greatest accomplishments wouldn't come from solving complex algorithms or creating artificial intelligence systems that reshaped industries. Instead, they would be measured by the legacy of compassion and integrity he could foster within the people he touched. The values of resilience and empathy had always been there, in the background, but now they had taken center stage in his life. As Sundar stared at the ancient book, the inscriptions began to feel less like foreign symbols and more like a guidebook for his future, a future he had yet to fully embrace. After hours of reflection, Sundar left the chamber, his mind now teeming with thoughts of how he could begin to change the trajectory of his life. He understood that in the world of technology, leadership was often about vision and precision. But real leadership, he now realized, was about something far more intangible, a human connection that transcended strategy and product development. What good was building the future of the world if the people in that world couldn't find meaningful connections, purpose, or fulfillment? In the weeks that followed, Sundar began to reconsider his role within Google. He had always placed immense pressure on himself to be a symbol of innovation and progress. However, the lessons from the hidden chamber under his villa urged him to approach his responsibilities differently. He no longer saw his role as merely leading a global technology empire, but as someone who could inspire a new generation of leaders to prioritize human well-being alongside technological advancement. It was time for him to lead by example, not just in his work at Google, but in his personal life as well. As he continued to study the ancient manuscript, Sundar became obsessed with uncovering the identity of the person who had written it. The book was filled with lessons on leadership, but it also contained personal reflections, stories of struggles, doubt, and perseverance. The author spoke of a life filled with hardships, yet one that had been deeply enriched by the simple act of helping others. Every passage in the book seemed to resonate with Sundar's own experiences. There were parallels between the author's journey and his own, moments of great achievement, followed by moments of deep reflection, seeking meaning beyond the accolades. Sundar's thoughts often drifted back to his childhood. Growing up in India, he had witnessed firsthand the profound impact of community. People were bound together not just by proximity, but by shared values. An unspoken understanding that true success was not about individual gain, but about lifting others up. Even as a young boy, Sundar had been moved by the generosity and kindness of the people around him. It wasn't until much later in life, when he moved to the United States and entered the high-stakes world of Silicon Valley, that he had started to lose sight of these fundamental human values. Success, in his new world, was often measured by wealth, influence, and technological advancement. Yet, in the midst of all his achievements, there remained a nagging feeling, a sense that something was missing. This discovery beneath his villa had rekindled the fire of those childhood lessons. He began to envision a future in which he could create a tech ecosystem that not only fostered groundbreaking innovations, but also nurtured the growth of human potential. He didn't want to be known only as the architect of Google's success. He wanted to be remembered for his role in shaping the future of humanity, where technology and compassion coexisted, where success was not just about creating smarter machines, but about creating smarter, more empathetic people. One of the first steps Sundar took was to reorganize the leadership structure at Google. He began to prioritize initiatives that emphasized social impact and community engagement. While his focus on innovation remained steadfast, he also made sure that new projects were aligned with the values he had come to appreciate: kindness, collaboration, and sustainability. Sundar encouraged his team to consider the human element in every product they developed, challenging them to ask themselves not just how their work could benefit the market, but how it could improve lives. He pushed for more collaboration with non-profit organizations, focused on using technology to solve pressing global issues such as poverty, healthcare, and climate change. But Sundar knew that real change would have to start within himself. He began to dedicate more time to cultivating empathy in his own life. He became more intentional about his relationships, spending time listening to others, learning about their struggles, and offering his support. Sundar took every opportunity to share his personal journey with his colleagues and peers, admitting his own vulnerabilities and fears. By doing so, he hoped to inspire others to embrace their humanity and lead with integrity. As the months went by, Sundar's transformation became evident. Those around him noticed a shift in his demeanor, a calmness, a deep sense of purpose, and a renewed focus on the people behind the technology. Google began to evolve as a company, no longer just a tech giant, but a leader in the space of social responsibility and human empowerment. Sundar's new vision for the company was taking root, and soon, it began to inspire other tech leaders and organizations to follow suit. It wasn't just Google that was changing. The entire landscape of Silicon Valley began to shift as well. More companies adopted practices that valued human well-being, integrating social good into their business models. It was as if a new era of leadership was dawning, an era where technology was not just seen as a tool for profit, but as a force for good. Sundar's journey was far from over, but he had finally found the path he was meant to walk, a path of purpose, resilience, and a commitment to inspiring others. One evening, as Sundar sat by the ocean, watching the sunset from the balcony of his villa, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The tunnel, the ancient book, and the lessons from the past had all led him to this moment. He had uncovered not just an old passage beneath his home, but a new passage within himself. The world had changed in profound ways over the course of his career, but now, he realized, it was his turn to change the world, not through technological marvels alone, but through the power of empathy and leadership that would shape the future for generations to come. The ripple of change. Months passed since Sundar's life had taken that unexpected turn, beneath the foundation of his villa, when the hidden tunnel and the ancient book had unlocked a transformative path. What had started as an accidental discovery had blossomed into a profound journey of self-awareness, spiritual growth, and deepened compassion. As he stood at the crossroads of personal reinvention, Sundar was determined to not just innovate in the tech industry, but to lead a wave of change that rippled through the very fabric of society. It wasn't enough for him to carry the message of kindness and empathy within the walls of Google. He wanted to bring it to the forefront of global discourse. For Sundar, this wasn't just a personal epiphany, but a responsibility. The lessons he had unearthed had revealed something fundamental about human nature, something far more meaningful than any algorithm or digital breakthrough he had encountered in his career. In the months that followed, Sundar began to immerse himself in understanding how technology could be an agent for good in the world. He was determined to break free from the cycle of relentless competition and economic measurement that often dominated Silicon Valley. His vision now was clear: to create a model where technology was a tool to uplift humanity rather than exploit it. He had come to understand that in the race for technological supremacy, society had often lost sight of the most essential things. The things that mattered most: genuine connection, understanding, and compassion. Sundar felt deeply compelled to shift the direction of Google, and more importantly, to inspire a larger movement that went beyond just his company. Sundar began by revisiting the core mission of Google itself, asking himself a question that had never fully been explored during the company's meteoric rise. What kind of world do we want to create with the power of our technology? He knew that he could never go back to the old way of thinking, the dogged pursuit of market dominance without regard for its deeper implications on human lives. Technology, he believed, should not merely be a mirror reflecting human ambition and ego. It should be a force for good that helps individuals discover their highest potential and empowers communities to thrive. The potential was there. It just needed to be harnessed with wisdom and foresight. This newfound purpose became the driving force behind Sundar's leadership. In the early days of his transformation, Sundar began addressing employees at Google with a renewed message, urging them to reevaluate their own roles in this new mission. He told them that their work was no longer just about meeting KPIs or launching the next big product, but about serving the greater good of humanity. He shared the lessons from the ancient book he had found under his villa, lessons that spoke of resilience, selflessness, and the strength found in embracing vulnerability. These ideas, though seemingly foreign to the cutthroat nature of Silicon Valley, began to take root among those who worked with him. With this foundation of empathy and ethical leadership in place, Sundar established new initiatives within Google. One of the most significant changes was the launch of a comprehensive global project aimed at using technology to address the world's most pressing challenges, from climate change to income inequality, from global health crisis to educational disparities. Rather than focusing on making incremental technological advancements, Google began to invest more heavily in projects that prioritized social responsibility. They created a fund dedicated to supporting startups and initiatives that focused on providing clean energy solutions to underserved regions, launched partnerships with NGOs that provided online education to children in conflict zones, and created platforms for communities to come together in ways that bridged cultural divides. Sundar was also intentional about how he communicated the importance of this shift to the public. Google's press releases, once full of technical jargon and product announcements, began to feature stories of how technology was being used to foster a more inclusive and sustainable world. Instead of celebrating the latest software upgrade, Sundar began to focus on the people behind the innovation, highlighting individuals who had overcome adversity and were using technology to solve problems in their communities. These were stories of resilience, creativity, and empathy, stories that helped to humanize the often cold, clinical world of tech. As time went on, Sundar's impact began to transcend his role at Google. He became a spokesperson for a movement of ethical leadership in the tech industry, where success wasn't just measured by profit margins and stock prices, but by the positive change companies brought to society. He spoke at conferences, appeared on global media platforms, and published articles advocating for the kind of leadership that didn't just focus on technical expertise, but also on emotional intelligence and moral responsibility. His speeches were filled with lessons from the ancient manuscript he had discovered, with references to the timeless wisdom that had reshaped his outlook on life. It wasn't just about creating tools, it was about creating a world where those tools could be used to heal, empower, and uplift. The ripples of his message began to spread, and soon other leaders in Silicon Valley started to take notice. Many had long grappled with the ethical implications of the rapid technological advancements of the past few decades. Sundar's bold approach to integrating compassion into the tech landscape inspired others to reconsider their own roles in shaping the future. Apple's Tim Cook, Microsoft's Satya Nadella, and even Tesla's Elon Musk, each in their own way, began to shift their focus toward creating a tech ecosystem that put people first. It was a subtle, but significant, shift in the industry. What had once been a race to dominate markets and territories now became a race to make a meaningful difference in the world. But the road was not without its challenges. Despite the growing momentum for ethical leadership, Sundar knew that the pressure to innovate rapidly and dominate markets was ever present. Google's competitors, still driven by conventional profit-driven models, began to push back against Sundar's philosophy. Critics argued that by focusing too much on social responsibility, Google might lose its competitive edge and its ability to create groundbreaking innovations. The tech world was notoriously ruthless, and the pressure to maintain dominance was immense. Sundar faced harsh criticisms from some quarters, especially from investors who were more focused on quarterly earnings than long-term impact. But Sundar stood firm. He knew that the world needed a different kind of leadership, one that valued people over profits and integrity over market share. As the stakes grew higher, Sundar leaned on the lessons from the ancient book to guide him through these turbulent waters. The journey wasn't about avoiding conflict or risk. It was about being true to one's convictions, even in the face of opposition. Slowly, over the course of several years, Sundar's vision began to bear fruit. Google's new focus on human-centered innovation led to the creation of groundbreaking technologies that not only improved people's lives, but also addressed critical global issues. From AI-powered healthcare solutions that revolutionized diagnostics in underserved regions to environmental technologies that helped cities reduce carbon emissions, Sundar's efforts were beginning to reshape the world in ways he had once only dreamed of. More importantly, he was proving that ethical leadership in the tech industry wasn't just possible, it was essential for the future of humanity. As Sundar sat in his office one quiet evening, reflecting on the journey he had taken from that pivotal moment beneath his villa to this new era of his life, he realized that he had finally found his true purpose. It wasn't in the technologies he had helped create, nor in the accolades he had received, but in the people whose lives had been touched by those technologies. It was in the connections he had fostered, the empathy he had cultivated, and the legacy of kindness that would continue long after his time at Google had passed. The ripple of change was now a wave, and Sundar knew that the work was far from over. It had only just begun. But for the first time in his life, he felt ready to meet whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that the path he was walking was the one he was meant to take. A new horizon. The work Sundar had started within Google and the broader tech community was beginning to reach critical mass. As the years passed, the tech industry slowly but surely began to adopt practices that prioritized human welfare. What Sundar had set in motion was no longer just a movement within Google. It had grown into a global wave of conscious leadership that spread across borders, industries, and generations. Sundar's story had become one of the most widely talked about in Silicon Valley, a tale of someone who had not only reached the top of the corporate ladder, but had chosen to use that power to lift others up. While many of his colleagues had remained focused on traditional corporate structures, Sundar's ideas had started to transform business itself. The emphasis was no longer on how fast a company could scale or how much money it could make. Now, companies were being judged not only on their financial results, but also on their social and environmental impact. Investors, too, were starting to take notice. The rise of ethical investing, where portfolios were built not only on financial returns, but also on the measurable positive impact companies had on society, marked a turning point. At Google, the company had now adopted a holistic approach to innovation, one that prioritized both technical advancement and human well-being. Every new project, product, and partnership was evaluated not just in terms of its potential for profit, but also for its potential to benefit society at large. The world of technology was no longer viewed through the lens of cold, calculated algorithms. It was viewed through the lens of empathy and connection. Technology was once again about what it could do for people, not just what it could do for businesses. However, Sundar's journey had not been without its share of personal sacrifices. The road he had chosen was not easy, and there were times when the weight of leading such a radical shift in the industry felt overwhelming. But Sundar drew strength from the lessons he had learned from the ancient manuscript, the words of an unknown figure who had once walked a similar path, enduring struggles and doubts, but never giving up. Every step Sundar took was guided by the belief that change was possible, and that the world could become a better place if the right people were in the right positions to lead it. As he looked out over the horizon from his villa one evening, Sundar felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew there was still much work to be done, but he was no longer daunted by the challenges ahead. His purpose had been redefined, not as a tech leader in the traditional sense, but as a leader for humanity, a guide in an era where technology and compassion could coexist. The future was bright, and Sundar knew he would continue to walk this path, one step at a time, always striving to make a difference. And so, the ripple of change continued, growing into a wave that would one day reshape the very fabric of society itself. The global movement. Years had passed since Sundar Pichai had embarked on his journey of transformation, both within himself and within the broader tech industry. What had started as a personal epiphany beneath the walls of his California villa had blossomed into a global movement that transcended the boundaries of Silicon Valley. Sundar was no longer just the CEO of Google. He had become a leader of a new era, one where compassion, empathy, and ethical leadership were not merely buzzwords but fundamental values driving technological progress. The tech world, once defined by cutthroat competition and relentless pursuit of market dominance, had slowly but surely begun to shift. Sundar's philosophy of people-first technology had started to take root not only within Google but across the entire industry. Other tech giants, once fixated on maximizing profits at any cost, began to reevaluate their approach to innovation, taking a more human-centered perspective. Sundar's commitment to social responsibility and ethical leadership had sparked a ripple effect that was being felt across the globe. Companies, large and small, were beginning to embrace the idea that success was not just about financial gain, but about creating positive, lasting change for humanity. One of the most significant milestones in this transformation came when Sundar launched an ambitious global initiative aimed at tackling some of the world's most pressing challenges. The initiative, called Tech for Good, sought to harness the power of technology to solve critical issues such as poverty, climate change, healthcare disparities, and education inequality. It was a bold move, one that reflected Sundar's belief that the tech industry had a moral obligation to address the problems that affected millions of people around the world. The initiative was not just about creating cutting-edge products or services. It was about using technology to make a tangible, positive impact on the lives of individuals and communities that had been overlooked for far too long. Sundar's vision for tech for good was clear. Technology, when used with purpose and care, could be a force for incredible change. The initiative aimed to bring together experts from various fields, including technology, government, and non-profit organizations, to collaborate on solutions that would improve lives on a global scale. From renewable energy solutions to AI-powered healthcare diagnostics, from bridging the digital divide in underserved communities, to creating accessible education platforms for children in conflict zones, the Tech for Good initiative sought to address some of the most complex challenges facing humanity. What made the initiative truly unique was its focus on collaboration. Rather than working in isolation, Sundar encouraged a collective approach that brought together the brightest minds from across the world. Whether they were from the tech industry, academia, or grassroots organizations, it was a recognition that no single company or individual had all the answers, and that real, sustainable change could only happen through collaboration and shared responsibility. The initiative also placed a strong emphasis on ethical considerations, ensuring that the technologies developed were not only effective, but also aligned with the values of fairness, equity, and social justice. The response to Tech for Good was overwhelming. Governments, international organizations, and businesses of all sizes began to partner with Google on projects aimed at addressing the world's most pressing issues. For Sundar, this was a validation of everything he had worked for, the realization that his vision for a more compassionate, ethical tech industry was not only possible but was gaining momentum. It was proof that the tech world could be a powerful force for good, and that leadership in the industry could be defined not by how much money a company made, but by how much positive impact it had on society. As the initiative gained traction, Sundar's influence began to extend beyond the tech industry. He was invited to speak at global forums, conferences, and summits, where he shared his vision for the future of technology and leadership. His speeches resonated deeply with audiences around the world, as he spoke not only about the power of innovation, but also about the responsibility that came with it. Sundar's words were a call to action for leaders in every sector: business, politics, education, and beyond, to think beyond profit and power, and to focus on creating a better, more equitable world for future generations. In one of his most memorable speeches, delivered at the United Nations Global Summit on Sustainability, Sundar spoke about the need for a global reset in how humanity viewed technology. He argued that technology should no longer be seen as a mere tool for economic advancement, but as a vehicle for societal progress. He called on governments to invest in digital infrastructure that would ensure equitable access to technology for all people, regardless of their socioeconomic status or geographic location. He also urged the private sector to adopt a long-term vision that prioritized social and environmental responsibility over short-term profits. "We stand at a pivotal moment in history," Sundar said, his voice steady and resolute. "Technology has the power to either divide us further or bring us closer together. We have the opportunity to use it to build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive, where our collective well-being is at the center of our progress. But to do that, we must commit ourselves to a new kind of leadership, one that is grounded in empathy, compassion, and a shared sense of purpose. This is not just about technology. It's about humanity." The impact of Sundar's words was profound. Many world leaders, inspired by his vision, began to align their policies with the principles of ethical leadership and social responsibility. International collaborations between governments, tech companies, and non-governmental organizations flourished. Public-private partnerships focused on sustainability, healthcare, and education gained traction, and new initiatives were launched to provide digital literacy training to underserved populations. Sundar's commitment to putting people first had sparked a global movement, one that was slowly but surely changing the way the world viewed technology and leadership. Back at Google, the Tech for Good initiative continued to thrive. The company's efforts to address global challenges had yielded remarkable results. In partnership with renewable energy companies, Google developed cutting-edge solar and wind energy solutions that were helping to reduce carbon emissions in developing countries. In healthcare, Google's AI-powered diagnostic tools were being used to identify diseases in their earliest stages, saving countless lives. The company's efforts to expand internet access to rural and remote areas had helped millions of people gain access to information, education, and economic opportunities. But Sundar knew that the work was far from over. While progress had been made, the challenges facing the world were vast and complex. Climate change, inequality, and social unrest were still very much present, and technology, while powerful, was only part of the solution. As Sundar reflected on the progress that had been made, he remained steadfast in his belief that the true potential of technology could only be realized when it was used to bring people together, to create a world where everyone, regardless of their background, had the opportunity to live a life of dignity, opportunity, and fulfillment. For Sundar, the journey was about more than just creating groundbreaking technologies. It was about creating a legacy, one where leadership was defined not by how much money you made or how many accolades you received, but by the positive difference you made in the lives of others. He knew that he could never change the world alone, but he also knew that he had a responsibility to continue pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And as long as he was able, he would continue to lead with purpose, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the power of human connection. The future of leadership. As the years went by, Sundar Pichai's impact continued to grow. What had once seemed like a fleeting moment of inspiration had become a powerful movement, a movement that was reshaping the tech industry, and in many ways, the world itself. His journey from the corridors of Google to the global stage had been one of personal and professional evolution, marked by a deep commitment to using technology for the greater good. But Sundar knew that true change was a long-term endeavor, and the path ahead would be filled with challenges and obstacles. However, one thing had become clear. The world needed a new kind of leadership, one that was grounded in empathy, responsibility, and a shared sense of purpose. Sundar's vision had sparked a shift in the tech world, and now it was time to take that vision further. His work had only just begun, and as he looked toward the future, he was more determined than ever to lead by example, pushing the boundaries of innovation while ensuring that humanity remained at the center of progress. Sundar knew that the future of leadership was not about wielding power, but about inspiring others to reach their highest potential. He was more committed than ever to building a future where technology was not just a tool for progress, but a force for positive change, one that would uplift humanity and bring people closer together. And in that pursuit, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that the journey was just as important as the destination. The power of collective action. By now, Sundar Pichai had become a symbol of ethical leadership and the transformative power of technology. His journey from being a tech executive driven by success to a global advocate for responsible innovation was one that had inspired countless leaders across industries. But despite all the achievements and accolades, Sundar knew the true test of his leadership lay in the collective action of others. Leadership, he had come to realize, wasn't about one person's vision or one company's success. It was about how far that vision could reach and how many people it could inspire to take meaningful action. This was the essence of what he had always hoped to achieve: to build a movement that was bigger than himself, one that transcended boundaries and united people for the common good. As his influence continued to grow, Sundar turned his attention to one of the biggest challenges that faced humanity: climate change. It was no secret that the world was on the brink of a climate crisis, and that technology, when harnessed properly, had the power to help mitigate some of the worst effects of environmental degradation. Sundar believed that this was an issue that required the collective efforts of governments, businesses, and individuals alike. No single entity could solve the problem alone, and yet each had a critical role to play in addressing the global environmental crisis. Sundar had always been an advocate for sustainable development, But as he dug deeper into the climate issue, he realized just how urgent the situation had become. The effects of climate change were already being felt in many parts of the world. From rising sea levels threatening coastal cities to unpredictable weather patterns ravaging agriculture and natural ecosystems. The evidence was irrefutable, and yet the pace of action had been frustratingly slow. Governments, corporations, and activists had made strides in pushing for renewable energy solutions and sustainable practices, but the global response was still fragmented. What was needed, Sundar believed, was a coordinated effort, one that involved every sector of society and leveraged the full potential of technology to drive meaningful change. In the spring of 2030, Sundar announced the launch of a new global initiative, the Green Horizon, aimed at bringing together leaders from across industries to address climate change and create a sustainable future for all. The initiative's goal was not only to reduce the carbon footprint of the tech industry, but to harness the collective power of global collaboration to combat environmental destruction. Sundar understood that technology had a critical role to play in the fight against climate change. Whether it was through the development of clean energy solutions, AI-powered systems that optimized energy use, or new innovations in sustainable agriculture and waste management. But more importantly, he recognized that the fight against climate change required a radical shift in how industries and governments approached environmental responsibility. The Green Horizon was ambitious in its scope, calling for significant investment in renewable energy, the decarbonization of global supply chains, and the development of new technologies that could address the environmental challenges of the future. Sundar's vision was simple yet profound: to build a world where technology didn't just create wealth, but helped sustain the planet for generations to come. He wanted to use the collective power of industry leaders to forge a new path, one where economic growth was no longer seen as a trade-off with environmental health, but rather as a symbiotic relationship that benefited both people and the planet. The initiative immediately gained traction, with some of the largest companies in the world joining forces to combat climate change. Google, Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, and other tech giants pledged to invest heavily in green technologies and make their operations carbon neutral by 2035. The initiative also brought together international governments, who agreed to work together to set ambitious environmental goals, such as reducing global carbon emissions by 50% by 2040. Additionally, the project sought to empower individuals and communities to take action, providing educational resources and tools to help people reduce their carbon footprint and live more sustainably. However, the road to success was far from easy. While the support for the Green Horizon was widespread, there were significant challenges along the way. Many governments were slow to enact the policy changes necessary to support green technologies, and some industries resisted change, fearing the financial costs of transitioning to more sustainable practices. There were also deeply entrenched political and economic forces that prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability. Sundar, though, was undeterred. He knew that change was never easy, especially when it challenged the status quo. But he was confident that the tide was beginning to turn. One of the most powerful aspects of the Green Horizon was its emphasis on collective action. Sundar understood that for the world to make real progress in combating climate change, every sector of society needed to be involved, from governments and corporations to individuals and communities. This wasn't just a problem that could be solved with top-down policies or corporate initiatives. It required a fundamental shift in the way people thought about their relationship with the planet. To facilitate this shift, Sundar's team at Google developed a suite of tools that empowered individuals to take control of their environmental impact. These tools allowed users to track their carbon footprint, set sustainability goals, and discover ways to reduce their environmental impact. By using machine learning and data analytics, Google was able to create personalized recommendations for how individuals could live more sustainably, whether it was by reducing energy consumption, cutting waste, or adopting greener transportation options. Sundar knew that while individual actions might seem small, they could have a collective impact that added up over time. It was about building a global community of people who were all committed to making a difference. The success of the Green Horizon was not immediate, but as time passed, the initiative began to show signs of real progress. In just 5 years, Google and its partners had reduced their collective carbon emissions by 30%, and renewable energy sources accounted for 60% of their energy consumption. The global commitment to green technologies was also paying off, with governments and businesses alike investing heavily in sustainable infrastructure. Electric vehicles became the norm, solar energy installations skyrocketed, and new innovations in energy storage made renewable energy more reliable and affordable than ever before. Perhaps the most powerful testament to the success of the initiative came from the communities that had been most affected by climate change. In parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where access to clean water, food, and healthcare had been limited by environmental factors, the Green Horizon provided a lifeline. Through the initiative, sustainable farming techniques were introduced, clean energy solutions were deployed to power homes and schools, and local communities were given the tools they needed to adapt to the changing climate. It was a clear example of how collective action, guided by a shared sense of purpose, could make a profound difference in people's lives. Sundar was humbled by the impact of the Green Horizon. He knew that while the initiative had made significant strides, there was still much work to be done. The global challenges facing the planet were not going away anytime soon, and there would always be forces that sought to maintain the status quo. But Sundar also knew that the power of collective action was greater than any one person or company. As long as people continued to come together to fight for a better world, there was hope. As he sat in his office, reflecting on the progress that had been made, Sundar couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. He had never imagined that a single discovery in the basement of his villa would lead to such a profound transformation, not just in his own life, but in the lives of people all over the world. The journey had been long, and it had been difficult, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. Sundar had learned that true leadership wasn't about achieving personal success. It was about inspiring others to reach their full potential and to make a positive impact on the world. Looking ahead, Sundar knew that the future was uncertain. The challenges facing humanity were immense, and the path to a more sustainable and equitable world would require continued effort, innovation, and collaboration. But he was confident that as long as people continued to work together, as long as they continued to believe in the power of technology to do good, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The journey was far from over, and Sundar was ready to continue leading the way. The enduring legacy. As the years progressed, Sundar Pichai found himself reflecting deeply on the incredible journey he had taken, from his humble beginnings in India to leading one of the most influential tech companies in the world. But as time went on, his personal sense of fulfillment increasingly came from his work beyond the walls of Google, from the way his philosophy had transcended corporate interests and helped guide global movements for sustainability, ethical leadership, and social responsibility. Sundar had always believed that leadership was not about holding power, but about inspiring others to do their best and make a difference. As he neared the end of his tenure as CEO of Google, his focus had shifted entirely from personal ambition to creating a world where the values of compassion, collaboration, and inclusivity permeated all aspects of life.